Hello. Today we will be delving into Reddit horror stories. These stories will send shivers up your spine, so sit back, relax, grab some hot chocolate, and let us begin. You're sure to want to lock your doors and windows and keep one eye open tonight. You never know what terrifying creatures will be watching you and waiting to make you their next victim. The Man in the Window. This happened in 2021, so still in the midst of COVID. I totally forgot about this happening until I was going through this subreddit and found a similar story. Essentially, 2 years ago, during COVID-19, a group of my friends and I wanted to all live with each other while we were doing remote learning at university. We go to a very popular school in California. I'm going to research if there are any links to this incident. As a group of girls living together during COVID does, we spent most nights watching movies, drinking wine, and hanging out all together. To give some context to the layout of our house, which I think is important to know, we lived in a massive house that was divided into 3 different apartments. We chose our apartment specifically because it was at the very back of the house, which made us all feel safer since we wouldn't have the normal riff-raff of being right on the street where anyone could easily see or decide to do anything sketchy. Not that we really thought it was an issue, but it made all 5 girls living in the house feel safer, especially since we were now all away from our families. In terms of inside, we have 4 bedrooms upstairs, and 1 bedroom right next to the open concept kitchen and living room. The ground floor bedroom faces our tiny parking lot, 3 cars, and a tiny garden, while our kitchen and living room face a little sidewalk alleyway that runs along the side of the house and leads to our front door. So it was a pretty big apartment. Rooms were small, but the communal kitchen and living room were a great hangout spot. Some foreshadowing, but since we got the apartment in the middle of COVID-19, we hadn't furnished it properly yet and did not have any curtains or blinds. The only thing that separates the window from the outside is a pretty flimsy bug screen. In the weeks leading up to the incident, my friend, who was the one living in the bedroom on the first floor, was complaining to the other 4 of us that if we wanted to bring anyone over, we needed to be at the door to grab them, so that they don't jingle and try the locked door every time. Apparently, she would always hear footsteps right outside her window, which faced our little parking lot at the back of the house, and hear someone try to open the front door or try to open a window. Looking back on it now, I don't really understand how we weren't as freaked out when she told us this. I think we just had such a false sense of security, since we had so many people in the house. We lived in the very back of the house, and we did have boys coming in and out of our house at night. So I guess it just wasn't unusual to hear footsteps, or at least we just kept blaming each other's hookups for not following the rules of staying outside until we opened the door for them. Anyways, my friend's complaints died down and we all kind of forgot about any issue that happened. We constantly got into fights in the house just because we were all cooped up inside all the time, so things that are said really just come and go, out of sight, out of mind mentality. This was until the day that the incident happened, and it was honestly the scariest thing that has probably ever happened to me. All 5 of us, plus 2 boyfriends, were all sitting in the living room for a Harry Potter movie marathon. We have 3 couches that are all placed in a U-shaped configuration and a shitty tiny TV we were able to buy for $150 at Best Buy. So it was a tight squeeze for all of us, but it felt so safe being around so many people, especially 2 huge guys. For some more pretext for our marathon, we all thought it would be kind of cute to make Harry Potter-themed treats. We made cupcakes and filled them with different colors for all the houses. One of my other friends made a sparkly cocktail and we were just kind of having fun with it. We had all of our lights turned off because, as you know, the Harry Potter films are filmed with a lot of darkness. And with such a crappy TV, it was genuinely hard to see what was going on at some points. At this point, we are really enjoying the film, until one of my friends says to pause the TV. She said that she has been hearing some crunches and footsteps for the past 30 minutes. This was my bad entirely, but I told her to stop scaring all of us because we have the other 2 apartments in the house who occasionally walk by our front door after they have parked, so it wasn't anything to be scared about. We continue watching the movie, and suddenly we hear giggling. It was a short burst, and then dead silent. We were all dead silent. It was almost like we couldn't believe we heard something so close by. We literally turned off the TV at this point because it was just really unnerving. And then there it was again. Whoever it was literally right outside of our door giggling. It didn't sound like a child's giggle. It was more like someone imitating a child's giggle, which really freaked us all out. We went to my bedroom window, which was above the front door, so that we could see if anyone was outside. As expected, no one was outside. No one was in the alleyway. So the boys decided they would just check outside our house in the parking lot and see if they can find anything. I think they were spooked too, but didn't want to admit it. The boys ended up coming back and said they couldn't find anything weird nor unusual, and it was probably just our next door neighbors because they were throwing a little kickback. So we probably just heard some weird echo. Maybe it's the false sense of security, but we were pretty satisfied with that answer. If the boys weren't even that freaked out, why would we be? So we decided to turn the TV back on, make some more popcorn, and just chill. Once again, maybe it's just stupidity, or feeling like nobody could hurt us with such a big group. But we opened one of the kitchen windows for some air after one of my friends burnt the popcorn. The kitchen window we opened was on the very far end of the kitchen and was the furthest window away from us. So it felt better knowing that even if something were to happen, at least we had some distance. Anyways, as it happened previously, we heard another giggle. This one sounded almost strangled, almost like it was really forced out. We looked towards the open window and see nothing. One of the boys decided to shout, "Shut the fuck up," for some comic relief, I guess. I think it made us feel better to think that it was just the house next door's party. We unpaused the movie, and not even seconds after unpausing do we hear another giggle, and this time when we look over, we see some guy's face pressed against the fucking bug screen while he continues to open and close his mouth as if he is trying to chomp down on the screen. His eyes were wide open and just staring at all of us as he keeps chomping. Holy shit, it was chaos. Literally, survival instincts went straight out the window for some of us, because while the boys ran to the window and tried to shut and lock it, everyone else was screaming or running upstairs or locking themselves into bedrooms. This is the part that I cannot recount, since I ran upstairs. But according to the boys, after they were able to shut the window and grab one of our kitchen knives, the guy just continued to press his face against the window, making the same chomping motion while not blinking. And he stayed like that until suddenly whipped his head back and literally disappeared into the darkness. We ended up calling the police to report this guy, but they kind of point blank said that they wouldn't really do anything unless we got hurt, but that they would definitely file a report about it for any future issues that could be called in. But that night we all decided to buy blinds for downstairs, and we called some of ours dads to help us install proper locks on the front door and all of the bottom floor window. So I guess all in all, nothing bad happened. There are a lot of people who overdose and do heavy drugs around campus, so it was most likely a result of someone who took too much of something. But it was definitely scary since we didn't actually know if his intentions were to come inside. Midnight encounter. Disclaimer: I can't verify the authenticity of the story. It's presented as a narrative my uncle shared about his friend's experience. According to my uncle, his friend went through a month of trauma after the incident. Today, I'm going to tell you a story that happened with my uncle's friend. This story is from 2007, about my uncle's friend named Sudarshan, who got a job as a lab assistant in a hospital in Bardhaman district, Kolkata. The hospital was a bit away from the town. Situated in a desolate area, Sudarshan was provided with a room to stay there. But when he entered the hospital, he felt a strange chill inside. Ignoring it, he started his work. When he returned to his room at night, he found it in disarray, as if a storm had swept through, scattering his clothes everywhere. Assuming it was due to the wind, he ignored it and went to sleep. Around 1:00 a.m., he heard a knocking on his door. Opening it, he saw a man in a doctor's white coat, but his face was not visible. Sudarshan lit the outside light, and when he turned back, the man was gone. Perplexed, he thought it might be his imagination and went to sleep. An hour later, there was another knock on his door. This time, when he opened it, a doctor named Bidhan, in a white coat, was standing there. They conversed for a while, but in the morning, Sudarshan couldn't find any trace of Dr. Bidhan in the hospital. A month later, when Sudarshan inquired about Dr. Bidhan, no one knew of such a person. Shocked, he checked the records and found no evidence of a Dr. Bidhan. When he returned to his room that night, there was no knocking on the door. However, around 2:30 a.m., he felt another knock, but he decided not to open it. Around 3:00 a.m., he sensed a presence near his bed and saw Dr. Bidhan again, this time with a hidden face. Suddenly, Dr. Bidhan began strangling Sudarshan. Darkness enveloped Sudarshan's eyes, and when he woke up, it was 8:00 a.m. He checked his neck and found marks. Terrified, he asked around the hospital and learned from an old man that Dr. Bidhan had lived there about 40 years ago. He was a good doctor but had mysteriously died in a room in the hospital, tarnishing its reputation. Since that day, Sudarshan quit his job. I'm a private investigator in rural Oregon. A missing person that doesn't exist has just been found. In 2016, I was working as a private investigator in rural Oregon. Most people make the stereotype that private detectives and investigators have walk-in clients, but that simply isn't true. I get almost all of my cases from clients by phone, and the call I got in that June was no exception. The client, a man named Jonathan Alexander, was calling about the disappearance of his father, Sergio Alexander. Jonathan's father had gone missing ever since a solo deer hunting trip in the backwoods of our little Oregon town, and the search parties and official parties hadn't turned up anything. In most cases like this, you're looking for a body in the woods, not a live person. But Jonathan was hopeful, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. In this case, I took my go bag, a duffel bag, and its contents were a bottle of water, a first aid kit, my Taurus Raging Hunter, a bag of Ziploc bags, my wallet and phone, and food. A Taurus Raging Hunter revolver might have been overkill, but I was planning to go into the woods, and the woods can be a dangerous place. This part of Oregon was stocked full of cougars, mountain lions, bears, wolves, moose, and some others, and almost everyone carried a heavier firearm when going into the backwoods. The first place on my schedule was Jonathan's house, where I would meet him in person and have an interview. As I pulled up into his dirt driveway, I got a sense of the kind of person he was. His house was a 25-foot trailer stuck to the ground, with a backyard and patio facing the mountains. "Are you Jonathan?" I asked the man waiting for me. He was tall, at least 6'5", and wearing a checkered button-up, a trucker cap, and jeans. "Yeah," he replied. "You're Inspector Jacob, right? Come inside, I'll tell you the details. I also have some things that could help you, depending on how willing you are." I walked inside the trailer, and the interior was everything I expected. The walls were lined with taxidermied bass and catfish, as well as several mounted deer heads and rifles propped up on display. A dirty kitchen with piles of dishes was one corner, and a small two-person dinner table. "Jonathan," John for short, and I sat down. Jonathan offered me a beer, but I declined. I never drank on a job. I started with the regular question. Where was he last seen? Who was with him? What happened leading up to the night of the disappearance? John replied, telling the whole story. My dad, Sergio, was a hunter and fisherman. Hunting and fishing was his life. He always had a rifle or a fishing rod. He's in his 60s and was in the military for 7 years, had a few tours in Afghanistan. On that night, he wanted to go solo buck hunting in the evening, so I dropped him off in a dirt road near his favorite spot. He didn't come back for 2 days. This was somewhat normal. He sometimes hunted overnight or just got lost. After a week passed, I got really worried. I could feel that something was wrong. I could feel it in my gut. I called the sheriff, and they organized a search party for 3 nights. We went in every direction, covered all the ground, and you know what? Not a single thing. Not a candy bar. No footsteps leading past his spot. No trail. Nothing. After he was declared deceased, I went out myself to search. I know he's still out there. I know it. And where is this dirt road? John marked the road on the GPS on my phone, and I thanked him and left. I had a no solve, no pay rule, so I wouldn't get paid unless I actually found Sergio, dead or alive. My next stop was at the sheriff's office, in the middle of my small town. I drove past multiple roadside stores until I reached the parking lot of the sheriff's office. I parked and walked into the place, going up to the front desk where a tall and skinny deputy was doing paperwork and chewing gum, presumably as a substitute for cigarettes. I told him that I was looking into the disappearance of Sergio Alexander, and he sent me to the sheriff's office. The sheriff, a balding man in his 50s named Clyde, showed a forced smile as I walked inside. A stained American flag was pinned to the wall, along with dozens of missing person posters and wanted posters. "So, Inspector, is this missing guy a friend of yours?" he asked. "Nah," I replied. "A client wants me to find him. Sergio is the guy's dad." "Well, you're in luck," Clyde replied. "We haven't gotten much criminal activity, so I can show you some of the search party reports." Clyde reached into his desk and pulled out a stack of papers and photos, which I flicked through. One of the photos captured an image showing a trail of footprints, ending abruptly. "And what is this?" I asked. "It's the strangest part of the case. The footprints leading to Sergio's favorite hunting spot just stopped. No trail leading somewhere else. No tire tracks. No ATV tracks. Nothing. It's like he just up and vanished into thin air." I sighed. This case was going to be a hard one. "What else of interest was there?" I asked, looking through the files. Clyde pulled out a satellite image of the woods, with a Sharpie written on the spot where Sergio had gone missing. "This is the entire area in which we estimate that Sergio could have walked around in the time he was gone," Clyde stated. "We checked every bit of it, and guess what? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But there was one thing we found of interest." "Which is?" I asked. "There was a pattern. Every time we checked a place, we heard Sergio's radio coming from somewhere." I raised an eyebrow. Sheriff Clyde continued, "But it was very, very faint. Could barely hear it. And another strange thing was when we went to search for Sergio, in the entire area where he went missing, all the birds and animals were quiet, even the crickets. As soon as we left the area of the supposed disappearance, the sound all came back. I checked the watch. It was early evening. After jotting down all the notes I could gather, I thanked the sheriff and left. My next stop, the woods. By the time I pulled up to the dirt road in my pickup truck, it was well into getting dark. This wasn't the ideal time for me to search through the area and find clues. Every detective knows how important the first 45 hours are. The place was exactly as John had described it. It was extremely rural, just a few miles away from a mountain range, and it was completely silent. The forest should have been alive, with birds chirping, wild turkeys moving about, crickets chirping, but the night was dead. Turning on my headlamp, I found Sergio's footsteps from when he was last seen and started combing through the area. Just like Clyde and Jonathan had said, the trail abruptly stopped in the middle of the woods. Nothing. No other signs that Sergio was even there. It was as if he just up and vanished. Suddenly, I heard some rustling behind me. It was fully dark by now, and nobody should have been there beside me. The sound came again, except it was now in front of me, but just out of the reach of my headlamp. "Who's there?" I yelled. "Show yourself. I'm armed." For dramatization, I flicked the revolver holster from my Taurus on my belt. Suddenly, something tapped me right on the back. I didn't have time to pull out my gun, and considering that whoever was doing this was probably some drunk guy, I wouldn't need it. I turned and threw a Mike Tyson haymaker in the thing's direction, and ended up hitting a tree and nearly breaking my wrist. In the split second that I was proud of my Mike Tyson haymaker, I realized that I had punched a tree and that my knuckles were actually bleeding. Whoever was behind me, if there was someone behind me, they were long gone. And that was when the laughing started. Actually, it was more like cackling. Weird, crazy, and unnatural cackling. Whatever you'd call it, it was unsettling anyway. I pulled out my revolver designed to drop bears and fired a deafening shot into the air. The laughing, everything, stopped for a bit, and I almost put my guard down. Then I heard something whisper, just an inch away from my ear. It said, "Love, THSLC." And the next thing I know, I hear the sound of a million running footsteps catching up to me, and I GTFO. I ran right out of the woods, fast enough to outrun Usain Bolt. Adrenaline is one heck of a drug. I jumped in my pickup truck, turned the engine, and peeled out of there, all in record time. Whatever was behind me was still chasing me, behind the car. I looked into the rearview mirror to try to look at the thing, which was running at least 80 miles per hour to keep up with me, and I saw nothing. Well, it wasn't a conceptual nothing. It was nothing in the sense that it was nothing my brain could comprehend and understand. There was a huge blurry shape running after me, dark as the night, and fuzzy around the edges. It was as if somebody took a huge mass of static from an 80s TV, made it into some sort of creature, and put it on a dirt road at 9 o'clock to chase some poor private investigator. I turned the road, drove down the road until I reached the town. The thing was, obviously, gone. I parked at a gas station parking lot and threw up once my body realized how much running I had done. The next day, I headed to a woman named Meredith's house. I had heard about her from when I was at the bar the night I saw the demon thing by some paranormal junkies who were particularly interested in what I said. Meredith apparently owned a tea and plant shop at the edge of town, having the shop based on the first floor of her house. She also knew a thing or two about paranormal entities, the occult, monsters, ghouls, and, well, you get the gist. I pulled up into the driveway of her shop and knocked on the door. "We're closed, asshole." Somebody, probably Meredith, yelled. I looked at the store hours taped on the front door. Today was a Friday, and according to her probably outdated store hours chart, she was, as a matter of fact, open. "You're open, so stop being lazy," I yelled right back. Meredith groaned and opened the triple-locked door. In person, she was a short Latino woman with long black hair and a purple beanie and wearing a trench coat and jeans, which was totally not suspicious. "What do you want?" she snapped. "What I want is to know what is in those woods. And lady, don't piss me off. I'm still on a hangover. You study the paranormal and supernatural, or am I wrong?" "No, you're not wrong." "Good. Because yesterday, I got bullied and chased by some weird demon thing while looking for a missing man in his 60s. Meredith's face went pale. I taught myself how to learn and read expressions people make, and by the looks of it, she knew exactly what I was talking about. "Come in. I might be able to help you." Like Jonathan's house, I was easily able to tell the interior of the house from the inside. There were plants everywhere, on the walls, growing in giant pots on the floor, as well as shelves stocked full of beakers and test tubes, and a few bags full of strange substances. I sat down on a worn-out couch while Meredith assessed my situation. "First of all, who told you about me?" she asked. "Some British fellow named Ron," I said. "But then again, I was drunk, so he might have been a John or Bob." "How did you say this thing looked like?" "Big, dark, blurry. I couldn't actually see it since it was at least 100 feet away, but it was running 80 miles per hour. Whatever it was, huge, must have been over 20 feet big." "Did you look at it directly?" Meredith asked. I answered plainly, "No. I looked at it through the rearview mirror, and even then I couldn't see it well." "Must be why you're alive." "What was that?" I asked. "What you just described is what we in the business call Nagalakwi." "Nagalakwi's," I muttered. "The heck is that?" "No one really knows," Meredith replied. "He, she, whatever Nagalaku is ancient. Has been in these woods for probably over a century, and no one knows where he came from." "You said that you were looking for a missing guy." "Right. Well, Nagalaku probably took him. Nagalaku might eat him, might let him go, might keep him for eternity. I don't know." "Then how do I kill this thing?" I asked. "I need to close this case." "You probably can't," Meredith said. "But whatever you do, don't look directly at Nagalaku, or your mind will literally melt at the unfathomable horror, and you will die. Do not look at it." "Don't look at the demon thing," I said. "Gotcha. Do you have, any herbs or materials that will stop Nagalaku from hurting me or doing anything?" "Yes, actually I do. It's white ash blessed by a shaman. If you sprinkle it over yourself or any weapons you have, it should be more effective against any supernatural being." Meredith stood up and walked towards a cabinet and pulled out a large Ziploc bag of white ash, which seemed to glow and vibrate, and she handed it to me. "This ain't free," she said. "It's $100. I sighed and reached into my wallet and pulled out $100 in cash and handed it to Meredith in exchange for the white ash. "Hey," Meredith called out as I packed up my stuff and headed for the door. "Yeah, be careful." Like that was even possible. I got out of there and drove to the gas station, where I planned to get my supplies to hunt Nagalaku and find Sergio Alexander. But before that, I needed to fuel up. I bought incendiary rounds from my revolver that the gas station surprisingly sold, and I ordered pineapple pizza while listening to Piano Man by Billy Joel. After I finished up and threw out my garbage, I had devised a plan, which involved flares, a bottle of vodka, a huge jug filled with gasoline, and a Molotov cocktail. The cashier, a guy named John, seemed very interested in the thing I bought from the gas station. He was a tall guy in his 50s, with a graying beard, a trucker cap, and a military attitude. "What are all these things for?" he asked, as I heaved the heavy gasoline tank onto the counter, along with some other flammable and extremely dangerous things. "Oh, nothing," I answered, trying not to sound suspicious. "Just trying to take care of a pest problem." But John didn't see that as nothing. "You're going into the woods, ain't ya?" I was caught off guard at how easily and accurately he knew what I was doing. "Yes," I replied. "Well, I'm off work after this shift, so I'll come with you." Or I could just report to the police that a private investigator is buying suspicious amounts of flammables and gasoline, along with 45 Magnum incendiary rounds for a Taurus Raging Hunter revolver. "You Army?" I asked. "Yeah," he replied. "Been in the US Marines and the Navy for a couple of years. Had 5 tours in Afghanistan. I didn't see any reason why John shouldn't come with me, and besides, I could use his military and combat skills, which might be useful. And I wasn't going to carry a 55-gallon tank full of gasoline in the middle of the woods alone." "Fine," I said. "Let's do this." A few hours later, just as the sun was setting, John and I got out of my pickup truck in front of the woods. John had brought his trusty 12-gauge, packed with Dragon's Breath incendiary rounds, and a mini flamethrower. John would be my backup and the bait, while I carried the gasoline tank duct taped to an explosive Molotov cocktail. The plan was, we would go to the woods, to the spot where I had last been attacked by Sagoth, and wait. Once we heard a sign of him, we would both put on our blindfolds to avoid having our souls sucked out by the unfathomable sight of the eldritch cosmic horror. "Ready?" John asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just don't shoot me while you have your blindfold on." We walked into the woods in silence, and after a mile or so, I reached the spot where Sergio was last seen. We sat there and waited an hour or so until all the noise suddenly stopped, and I heard the sound of something massive dragging across the forest floor. "Put on your blindfold," I said, putting on mine. "We can't risk seeing this thing." John nodded, grinned, and put the blindfold on. Whatever it was, sounded massive. It said in a demonic and ancient voice, "Eve te Chespiel." John and I fired a shot into the direction of the voice, and although my bullet missed by a mile, the old man's shot was a direct hit. Although I couldn't hear it, I saw the light from the blast of fire, sparks, and flames coming from the barrel of John's shotgun, and it hit the demon monster. The thing screeched, and we moved back a few steps. Still blind, and without warning, the ground opened beneath us. "What the fuck?" John and I fell into the cavern beneath us, 6 feet. "You okay?" I asked. "Never been better," John replied. "What is this place?" I lifted my blindfold and looked around to see that we had fallen into a subterranean tunnel that led deeper into the earth. "Anyone there?" "Fucking help," a voice screamed, presumably Sergio's based on the circumstances. We ran down the tunnel and searched for Sergio, and we found the man, lying on the cave floor with a broken leg. "We're gonna get you out of here," I said. I heard a screech come from the entrance to the tunnel as Nagalaku crawled down, breaking the wall. I reached down and picked up the tank of gasoline, had my eyes closed, and waited until Nagalaku was just close enough, my heart beating. "Gut." I lit the Molotov, yelled at John to take cover, just as Nagalaku got within a dozen meters in our range. I had previously sprinkled the white ash Meredith had given me on the gasoline tank for extra effectiveness, and so that could kill Nagalaku if the explosion didn't. Nagalaku was only a few meters away from us. I lit the gasoline bomb and threw it, and as it exploded, I grinned. "Gotcha, asshole." So the funny thing is, a group of redneck hunters found us later. They had apparently found the hole in the explosion crater and investigated. John and I had suffered some mild burns from the enormous gasoline explosion, but the missing guy, Sergio, came out harmless besides the broken leg he already had before. The redneck family dragged us all the way to their pickup truck, then drove us to the hospital, where we both got treated for our injuries. Sergio was found and reunited after a long disappearance, and Jonathan paid me in the thousands, with the money I didn't expect him to have. When I went back to the place where Sergio had disappeared, and where I had blown Nagalaku high to the sky, I found a very strange, giant, half-human skeleton, where I remembered Nagalaku getting blown up. Sergio Alexander was found, and I had killed one of the things that went bump in the night. Case closed. Don't fuck with the woods, kid. The glitch in the Matrix in my school. This isn't exactly a horrifying story, so don't get too disappointed if you're not terrified. For background, I'm a 15-year-old Irish fella called Ross. I go to school in Ireland. I am now in 3rd year. At the start of 2nd year, my new fella joined the school. I was in charge of showing him around, and we've been good friends ever since. He is Portuguese, and his name is Tiago. I'll call him Tig for this story. His school bag is a fairly small, bright red bag. He is a bit shorter than me. His hair is quite short and brown in color. This will become important momentarily. One day I was upstairs in my school. It was break time, and I was going to my group's usual spot. I turned a corner and saw Tig walking along the hallway. This was weird because at the distance I was from him, I would have seen him come up the stairs. I didn't think much of it at the time. I sped up to catch up to him. There was another corner coming up. He rounded it, and I followed suit. Except he wasn't there. There was a staircase going back down and 2 bathrooms, one for lad and one for lassies, but no Tig. Considering how close I was behind him, he would have had to sprint towards and then jump down the stairs or jog into the bathroom. If he went for the stairs, I would have heard. He must be in the bathroom, I thought. I sat at the bench and waited. Tig was the first other person in our group to arrive. He rounded the corner and left his bag down. The realization hit him hard. He wasn't in the bathroom. I asked him if he had already been up there, to which he answered that he hadn't. He had no reason to lie. Now, I know what you're all thinking. It was someone else. First of all, the person I saw looked the exact same as my friend from the back. Second of all, no one else in the school has that bag, to my knowledge. I haven't seen anyone else with it, that is. Third, the only place the person could have gone, without sprinting down the stairs, which I would probably catch a glimpse of anyway, would be the bathroom. No one came out of the bathroom that I didn't see enter it. Finally, my friend is a fairly distinct character. Not many people had the same body build as him. Like I said at the start, it's not exactly terrifying. But I do believe it to be due to a glitch in the Matrix. The Stalker. I was 16, and me and my friends, I'll call Evan and Jake, wanted to rent a hotel for the night since it was spring break. We got to the hotel and checked in. It had a really funky smell, but we still stayed there. Once we got to our room, it was about 3:00 p.m., so we decided to go swimming. The pool was downstairs, departed from the hotel. Once we got to the entrance, there was a man at least 6'3" in all black with a hood covering his face facing us. I panicked a little, but not out loud. We got into the pool and swam for a few hours until we saw that man again, all black, sitting on a chair by the pool. I cleared my throat. Can I help you, sir?" I asked. No response. I still ease a little paranoid. I put my face in the water, and at the bottom of the pool was another figure that was all black. I screamed like a little girl and ran for the door. I looked back and saw nothing. Not the guy in the chair or the guy under the pool. My friends thought I was just seeing things, but I saw what I saw as clear as water. I didn't feel like swimming anymore, so I decided to get dinner at a nearby restaurant. I got a table for me and my friends to sit at, and there I saw once again the man all in black on the other side of the dining room and was staring at me. I have had enough. I went over there and I lost track of him, and he took off. After we had, I decided this trip has gone too far. We should leave tomorrow morning, but my friends didn't like that idea. Once it was 10:30, I and my friends dozed off in the hotel room. I woke up to some noises. I saw a shadow of a figure at the end of my bed. I calmed myself down and told myself that it was my hat that I put there before I went to bed. I went to bed and got woken up again 30 minutes later to more noises. I was getting thirsty, so I reached under the bed and tried to grab my water bottle, but I grabbed something and I was totally shocked by what I grabbed. It was my hat. I was not ever more scared in my life. I couldn't help but to scream at the top of my lungs when I heard a voice next to my ear say, "You're a bitch." I jumped out of bed and realized it was 2 men in black right there. I tried to fight them, but it was no use once they grabbed me and dragged me out of that room. I tried to scream, but that guy was covering my mouth. I passed out and woken up in a stretcher. It turned out those guys knifed me while I passed out and someone caught them. But the doctor said no one could catch the guys who got me. To this day, I always have a nightlight at night, so I'm not scared. My sleep paralysis episode. I am a 19-year-old female, and at the time that all of this happened to me, I was 17. So just to give some long and necessary background, I was and still dating a guy named Kyle. That's not his real name, but go with it. We shared a small group of friends. We were all pretty close to each other. We did almost everything together, especially when it involved smoking weed and doing other harder substances. They were pretty chill and trustworthy friends. Or so I thought. Anyways, One day, 2 weeks before my junior year started, I was hanging out with the group at one of their houses, and I just so happened to fall asleep after a while of being there. I woke up probably 5 minutes later to one of my friends touching my inner thigh. Just to note, I was the only female in the group, and my boyfriend wasn't there when this occurred. He was at show choir practice, so he couldn't have been there even if he wanted to. When the friend touching me noticed I woke up, he immediately stopped, and I ran into the bathroom crying. I've been raped and sexually assaulted before, so just going through it again isn't the greatest feeling. A few minutes passed by and I left the bathroom. I pulled one of my friends aside and told him what happened. His response shocked me. He said he saw what happened, but he didn't stop him. I don't know why he didn't, and I guess I'll never know, but that same friend told me not to tell Kyle because he didn't want any friendships ruined. Well, I obviously told Kyle after show choir practice, and he was understandably pissed off. We've come to the agreement that we will no longer be friends with them anymore. A few days went by still avoiding the group, and we would receive a lot of messages from them, but they were shocking and hurtful messages saying I'm being overdramatic, that it's my fault that it happened, just act like nothing ever happened, he didn't really sexually assault me, and so on. I was pretty destroyed reading all those messages coming from those so-called friends, but for some stupid reason, we all became friends again when school started. I know what you're thinking. Why would we go back to that shitty group of friends? I guess our only lame excuse is that we hate confrontation, and we wanted things to go back to normal. I wanted to feel normal again. Well, obviously it wasn't the best idea taking back those friends, especially the one who touched me, because it started to really affect me mentally. I became super depressed. I developed really bad trust issues with everyone, including my boyfriend. I would constantly have panic attacks throughout the day. I started self-harming again. I was extremely suicidal, and I was failing all of my classes because I rarely showed up to school. The school attendants and staff had no idea what was wrong with me. I would refuse to tell them and my family, but one day came around and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told my family, and at first they were supportive, but then it quickly changed. I don't really want to go into the details, but for a long time I felt so alone. Later on, around November 2017, my boyfriend did something behind my back with another girl. He didn't cheat on me. He just sold some weed to her. But for some odd reason, I mentally got worse. I just didn't know how to cope with anything that has and was happening to me. I started mentally abusing my boyfriend, like extremely bad to where he hated himself. And I think at some point he even became suicidal. Deep down, it made me happy. I wanted someone to feel pain too, but it got so bad that we broke up twice, but then got back together the same day each time. Now fast forward to around February 2018. One night, that's when it happened. I was having trouble sleeping, and it was getting late. I also had school the next morning, so I was getting pretty frustrated. Finally, around 1 a.m., I started dozing off. I found myself awake probably about 10 to 15 minutes later. I noticed a tall, dark figure standing across the room in my closet. At first, I thought it was my older brother messing with me because he's done stuff like this before. But as I tried to say his name, I couldn't. That's when I realized I couldn't speak, couldn't move. I was paralyzed. So as I'm staring at this figure in my closet, wondering what the fuck is happening, the figure starts moving closer to me. Then I noticed it kind of looked like it was floating towards me. I could feel myself panicking, but I couldn't move or say anything. So when the tall, dark figure reached the side of my bed, I kid you not, it bent over and grabbed my nose. Now I couldn't breathe through my nose or mouth. I'm just staring at this dark figure. Its face was so close to mine, but I couldn't make out any features. I can feel my heart trying to break out of my chest. My lungs are hurting like hell because I couldn't breathe. I legitimately thought I was going to die, but suddenly I quickly sat up, gasping for air, looking around my room for that figure, but it wasn't there. I was scared. I was so scared. I didn't know what just happened. I thought I just had the most realistic nightmare of my life. I mean, I guess that's kind of what happened. The next morning when my boyfriend picked me up for school, I told him about the realistic nightmare. He said that's creepy, and that was that. A few weeks later, I brought it up to my older brother, and that's when he told me that I actually had sleep paralysis. I had no clue what sleep paralysis is, but after hearing his definition of it and doing some research, I was really freaked out. I read online that stress, anxiety, depression, sleep problems, and some other things can cause sleep paralysis. I realized that everything that had happened to me sort of recently played a big part in my sleep paralysis episode that night. I would be lying if I said I didn't have trouble sleeping for a while after that. but I eventually got over it. But every now and then, I do get a little nervous to go to sleep. Fast forward to now. Kyle and I are doing really well, better than ever. We are renting our own apartment. We have 2 cats, and they are absolutely amazing. Our 3-year anniversary is next month, and we are extremely excited. On another note, September 22, 2019, I was diagnosed with extreme depression and anxiety disorder, but I now go to therapy and take medications to help with that. I have never felt better and happier. Oh, and in case you were wondering, we are no longer hanging with those shit friends anymore. City horror. I should mention that I previously lived in a tiny town, but went to high school in a considerably larger city. I never had a reason or the nerve to go out in the city on my own, so when my 2 friends wanted to hang around town, I was nervous, to say the least. However, I thought, what the hell, I'll be with them. We had a blast for a couple of hours after school, with some small scary incidents along the way, including walking through a store full of expensive statues and gemstone with a massive backpack protruding from my back, and the original restaurant we wanted to go to was closed, forcing us to Subway. However, as it got dark, we all knew we had to go home, so we all enjoyed one last store and went on our separate way. I waited outside the store, alone, in the dark, not terribly afraid. Yet, I had told my mother where to find me, but she's hopeless with directions, so I had expected to be hanging around for a while. I noticed a news camera stationed outside the store, which made me feel even safer. But about 10 minutes into the wait, I was approached by 2 men. My memory is fuzzy, due to how freaked I was, but this is what I remember. Hey, do you know where name of a town that I can't remember is? I shook my head. Was already nervous because I'm a paranoid person on the best of days, and this was not turning out to be the best of days. Come on, one man coaxed. Listen, we'll give you a bag of jewelry if you help us, the other man said. Now, I was genuinely freaking out. I glanced around and noticed the news camera, and stepped a little closer to the line of sight of the lens. Listen, I stammered, trying really hard not to stammer or show how freaked I was. I think it's that way, and I don't need anything, I said, pointing in random-ass direction. They glanced in the direction of my finger. They glanced back. Can you show us? Again, we have a bag of jewelry. It felt as if my heart leaped into my throat. No, thank you. And my mom is coming to get me. I declined as calmly as I could. They stared at me for a few seconds, then nodded, thanking me and heading off in the direction I pointed at. I kept well in the line of sight of the news camera until my mother picked me up. I didn't fully relax for a full week. I have absolutely no idea why they were so eager to give me that bag of jewelry. My first thought was that they stole it and wanted to throw the police off their trail by handing some of it off to me. The second was that they were trying to lure me away with the jewelry. Either way, it wouldn't have ended well for me, if that was their goal. No, one believed me, but I didn't expect them to, really. I have never felt comfortable in the city, alone, in the dark, ever since, even though it's been 2 years and I now live in a decently sized city. For college, the room with the train. This story is not about a ghost or an encounter with a creepy stranger. It's not even about a near-death experience or something like that. As a matter of fact, I was never in danger during the event I'm about to tell you about. Nonetheless, it's a disturbing memory that I will carry with me until the day I die. I grew up in a small city, the kind of place you could barely call a town if it wasn't for the sheer number of people living there. Downtown was only a couple of blocks long, and in the middle of it was one of the biggest buildings in the area. It was the local movie theater, named after the city. I remember going there when I was very young, about 7 years old, and watching the first Pokemon movie. It was probably nothing compared to the theaters we have nowadays, but back then it was huge for me. I loved it. So when a few years later I heard the cinema was going out of business, I felt really sad about it. The building was sold to a religious group that used it for their services. You know the type. Loud music, big crowds with their arms in the air singing prayers, some having seizures on stage while the pastor yells through a mic. Every time I walked past the old cinema, I would see the announcements of the congregation where the movie posters would have been, and if they were in session, you could hear them singing from the other side of the street. This group owned the cinema for nearly a decade, until the local government bought back the building in order to restore it as a historic landmark of the city. When this happened, I was studying construction, with the intent to follow architecture or civil engineering at college, and my class was very lucky to be involved with the cinema's restoration project, because 2 of our teachers were architects working on it. I will always remember the day we went to visit the old cinema. Our class was small, only a handful of students, but we were all around the same age, so we all shared childhood memories of when the cinema was operational. We ran through the corridors of the auditorium, sat in the chairs just like we did when we were little kids, and began stomping on the wooden floor with our feet, filling the entire room with the echoes of our drumming and our laughters, a little ritual or sorts everyone used to do right before the beginning of the movie. Once nostalgia time was over, we went back to the purpose of the trip and began to survey the building. We were very excited because that was a unique opportunity to go into the places we would have never been allowed to otherwise, so we made sure to check every last corner, every single room, no matter how far, no matter how obscure. The first one we found was below the stage. On one of the corners there was a little door, not very visible, probably because it was meant for maintenance staff only. Behind it we found a long room filled with rusty boilers, part of the old heating system that was no longer in use. The place was a little creepy, with all of those old tanks and pipes crowding the narrow space. But what we found past them was what really started to freak us out. This room was small, very small. It was, after all, basically just leftover space behind the boilers, yet it contrasted so much with the rest of the area around it. It may as well have been from a different place altogether. The walls were painted a light color, white I think, but I don't remember it very well because what really got my attention were the drawings in them. They were rainbows, a smiling sun, trees and flowers, and happy little people with smiles on their faces of dotted eyes. It was a daycare. The whole class and teacher gathered to see the discovery. We were all very confused about the strange placing of this room. Okay, we could understand the need for a place to keep the kids that were too little to be amongst the crowd during prayers, or maybe the ones of the people who worked there. But the placing was just odd. The stage was probably one of the loudest places in the auditorium during the services, and this was right below it, so there was no way it could be a quiet place for the children. We left the boilers room and continued our tour through the theater, a little puzzled about our finding but not giving it too much thought. Outside of the auditorium there were the bathrooms, both in terrible condition, the ticket sale booth, and a huge set of stairs that led to a mezzanine in the auditorium. Half of the seats there were totally ruined due to a water leak in the roof, and I cursed these people for not taking proper care of the building. With that part done, all that was left was the projection room, on the 3rd floor. Behind the tickets booth there was a door that led to a spiral stair. I don't remember how tall it actually was, but it must have been over 10 meters of metallic steps without a single resting spot. I wasn't exactly an athlete, but I could walk several kilometers with no problem and rode on a bike to and from school every single day. Yet by the time I reached the top of the stairs, I was exhausted. And I wasn't the only one. All of my classmates complained about how hard it was to walk up there. After a short break to catch our breath, we moved on to explore the 3rd floor. It was roughly a narrow passageway with a couple of divisions to form different rooms, but it was more than enough for what it was made for. The first room from the stairs was a storage deposit, probably where they kept the movies and other equipment, and except for some trash, it was mostly empty. The second room was the one we were all excited to see, the projector room. The old machine was so big that it was still there, and there were even some pieces scattered around. It was quite a piece of history, and we were all very thrilled to check it out, so no one really bothered to move on to the very last room until we were about to leave. And there we saw it again. There was a train in this one instead of a rainbow. Something was written on it, in big, colorful letters. Something about Christ. I can't remember it well. The drawings were a bit old, the paint slightly peeled from the walls, but the colors were just as cheerful as you would expect for a place where children play. My heart sank to my stomach as I came to the realization of what that place really was, the one behind the boilers probably serving the same purpose. I took notice of how isolated that room was, literally the furthest away you could possibly get from everyone else. I thought about the 3 floors of stairs and imagined what it would have been like for a child to walk all the way up, only to end up in that room, the room with the colorful train in the wall. My classmates and I exchanged horrified expressions, as I knew they were thinking the same. We never visited the theater again, even though we continued with the restoration project for several months. And we never talked about those 2 rooms. Cases of molestation in the church are well known by everyone, to the point that the pedo priest is practically a cliche. But this is the kind of thing you think happens in some place far away, in another city, even in another country. You never imagine it can happen in the very same town you live in, the place where you grew up, in the very same building where you once watched a Pokemon movie when you were 7 years old. The doll in the storage room. When I was younger, I'd go visit my grandparents all the time. They lived in a 1-floor house with an unfinished basement. I never liked it down there. It felt small for a big basement. There was a little door down there that was for storage, and I always got a horrible feeling when going close to it. And let me add that this was a newer house that was about 6 years old. Now, during the time I was about 6 or 7, I felt so uncomfortable going down there even when I was with someone. I didn't like it. I remember going down there with my grandma to help with something. She had to run upstairs because someone rang the doorbell. She said she would be right back even though she knew how I felt about being alone down there, but I nodded and said okay. She was gone and I was alone, and I started to get a bad feeling in the pit of my stomach. I didn't move and didn't want to. Even though the lights were on now, this is where everything started happening, and it still gives me chills. The lights started to flicker and I started to hear noises and what sounded like talking, and it was not coming from upstairs but in the storage room. I heard someone say my name. Here is the part that freaks me out the most. The voice sounded like my grandma. I was confused as hell. How am I hearing her when she is upstairs? I didn't want to move, but me being the curious one I am, I started moving towards the storage room door. The closer I got, worse the bad feeling came. When I got to the door, the lights turned off in the basement. I wanted to run upstairs and hide. Go home somewhere that wasn't the basement. I heard my name again for the 2nd time. My grandma's voice asking me to open the door to help her, so I did, and I regret it. I couldn't see anything. It was pitch black. I couldn't hear anything but faint laughing that felt like forever. But then the laughing stopped and the lights turned back on in the basement. And I felt a little bit better with the lights back on, but the downside I could see a little in the storage room. I saw a small clown doll in the storage room, and my grandma hates clowns with a passion and wants nothing to do with them. So why is there a clown doll? I have no damn idea. Then the lights turned on in the storage room. I saw red that looked like blood all over the place. I screamed and blacked out, and the next thing I knew, I was laying on the couch. My grandma looking at me and asking if I was okay. I have no idea if that was real or a dream, but it sure as hell felt real. If you have any idea, please let me know. Hey, I hope you enjoyed those chilling tales. Please be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and turn on post notifications so you know when I upload more terrifying stories. If you'd like me to feature your story, send me an email, which will be in the description below. Thanks again, and have sweet nightmares.